everybody brings such gifts to the group dynamics. We create our own kind of family when we're there. Cleo really, from my perspective, brought the spirit of the social connections and the social being, the eyes, the heart, really caring about people there and people that we traveled with. And I saw it show up in so many ways. Together, group, small ways, large ways. So I really look forward to your presentation. Thank you.
So I'm Cleo Rosa, and I'm going to be talking about if Buddhism is a philosophy or a religion. And even though it might be a natural association with Buddhism, that it's a religion, there's a lot of different opinions out there, and some people do believe that it's more of a philosophy. So first of all, the Maya Gold Foundation was founded in 2015 by Elise Gold and Matthew Swerdloff. And their mission is to empower youth to access their inner wisdom and realize their dreams. And they offer a bunch of different programs in the Hudson Valley. And every spring they take a group of local teens to Nepal. And this year, I was a part of that. So the purpose of the trip is to offer Hudson Valley teens an educational experience that includes cultural awareness and appreciation. While we're there, we're constantly surrounded by the ancient culture of Nepal and also the modern day culture of Nepal. We see a lot of ancient architecture, and we do a lot of sightseeing, and while we're there, in this picture back here you can see we spend a lot of time with a group of teens from Himalayan children's charities, and we travel around with them, and on this day we were going on a hike, and it was really fun to spend time with everyone. It also includes service to others. We spend 2 days at a school in Nepal painting 2 different murals, and then in this picture we're at a rural school where we spent the day doing activities and games with the kids. We also all collected donations before leaving, and we brought them in big suitcases, and then we distributed them to different charities or different organizations while we were there. The other purpose of the trip is to empower teens to gain a greater sense of ourselves and the world. So first of all, I want to know what religion is to all of you guys. And I think there's a lot of different definitions. It can be a pretty personal thing, but I just want to know everyone's answers. There's no wrong answers. Anyone can call out.
Creation God.
Rules. Answers to big questions.
I would say that it's a system of practices that calms the mind, opens the heart, and is like a path toward the divine through practices.
Maybe a belief in something greater than oneself.
Anyone else?
Food for the spirit.
Okay, great. So those are some good definitions. Some pretty common ones are the belief in and worship of a superhuman controlling power, especially a personal god or gods. A personal set or institutionalized system of religious attitudes, beliefs, and practices. So my next question is, what is philosophy to all of you? Same thing, just call it out.
Love of wisdom.
Mind training.
The study of big questions, like what's the meaning of life? Kind of thing.
System to ask questions around the meaning of life and to develop continuing sort of equations about it.
Great. So some common definitions of philosophy are that it's the study of general and fundamental questions, such as those about existence, reason, knowledge, values, mind, and language. The study of the theoretical basis of a particular branch of knowledge or experience. So, as you can see, you could interpret philosophy and religion as pretty closely related, but there are some differences, and I think someone said, I think you said, like it's more of like rules. And that's the way that a lot of people associate religion, is that it's more of a strict rule book than just an exploration. So with all those things in mind, I'm going to give some basic background knowledge of Buddhism. So the Buddha, or Siddhartha Gautama, was born in Lumbini, which is in modern-day Nepal. And he was born into a royal family, and they were Hindu leaders. And when he was born, there was a prophecy told that he was either going to become someone of great religious significance or a big leader of a kingdom. And his father desperately did not want him to become a spiritual leader. So he worked for Siddhartha's entire youth to hide all suffering from Siddhartha in the hope that basically he wouldn't have any deeper thought. And he did that through just kind of surrounding Siddhartha by only pleasures, so music and dance and festivities. And he hid all suffering and all sadness and all sickness and death and ugly people. And then one day, when Siddhartha gets a little older, he decides that he wants to explore the city that he's one day going to be ruling. And his father, he convinces his father, and he goes out into the city. And while he's there, he sees different types of suffering. And it said that the suffering he saw was sickness, old age, and death, which are all different things that we saw a lot of while we were in Nepal. So when he saw these things, he was, of course, really shocked because he had never seen anything like this in his life before. I think everyone group was not as sheltered as Siddhartha was, but it was still difficult for some of us to see some of the hardships that we did while we were in Nepal. So one of the things he saw was illness, and as you can see back here, there's a picture of a man on the street who was clearly, visibly malnourished. And for me personally, that was one of the things that was more difficult to see while we were there, because there was a lot of people living and a lot of suffering, and illness was something we were seeing a lot of. The picture on the bottom is the funeral pyres. We got the amazing experience of experiencing this, where they have all these different stations where they're burning the bodies, and it goes on constantly throughout the day and the night, and it's all on this holy river. And we got to see a ceremony and a funeral. And I think it's really interesting to note, like, these are the things that gave Siddhartha his spiritual awakening, and we got to see all of them. So anyway, yeah, so he sees all these things, and he basically just has an identity crisis. And he totally freaks out, and he abandons his life, his like royal future. And he goes and he finds a group of men who are meditating in the forest, and they are working under the belief that if you deprive your body of many of its needs, you will you'll get closer to a spiritual awakening. So for years and years and years, he meditates with these men, and he only eats the food that falls into his lap from like trees above him. And after a couple years, a woman brings him a bowl of food, and he sees it, and he kind of realizes that he's not having spiritual awakening. He's just really hungry, and he's kind of fatigued because he hasn't eaten or taken care of any of his basic needs. So he decides to eat the food, and when he does this, he realizes the middle path, which is the idea that there is a path between complete indulgence and complete deprivation. And so he leaves those men that he was with previously, and eventually he finds his way to the Bodhi tree. And he meditates under the Bodhi tree for 49 days. And while he's there, he comes to many realizations, and eventually he reaches enlightenment. So one of the things he notices while he's under the Bodhi tree is the Four Noble Truths, which is 1, life is suffering. And that sounds pretty dark, but as I recently had described to me by a nun, Buddhism and English don't always align very well. And it's not saying that all life is suffering, it's saying that there is suffering in life, and it's inevitable that eventually in your life you're going to encounter suffering. And the second truth is that the cause for suffering is attachment, or clinging to certain like outcomes or personal achievements and like self-centered outcomes. So third truth is that there is an end to suffering, and the fourth truth is that end is, or enlightenment can be reached through the Eightfold Path. So enlightenment or nirvana is the concept of no self, and there's no suffering or desire. So the Eightfold Path is right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentrations. And it's believed that if you practice these different steps, you can eventually reach a higher state of being. Another concept in Buddhism is the six perfections, which is dana, generosity, sila, morality, ksanti, patience, virya, joyous effort, dhyana, concentration, and prajna, wisdom. And you're supposed to incorporate these different things in your life all the time, and you're constantly trying to bring these forms of like generosity and patience and love and compassion into your own life and to the life of the people around you. So some common practices of Buddhism are meditation, obviously, which is basically just meant to work on achieving a higher state of being. Also, mantras are a big part of Buddhism, which is basically you're repeating certain phrases in your mind or out loud all the time, and it's the idea that through your thoughts, you can create different realities. So I think a really good quote to describe this is from Gandhi, which is, your beliefs become your thoughts become your words become your actions become your habits become your values become your destiny. Another interesting part of Buddhism is the Kumari, and that's actually not a Buddhist practice, it's a Hindu practice, and it's something that we got to see or catch a glimpse of when we were in Nepal. And the Kumari is a human goddess, and there's a girl, and she is decided that she is a human goddess, and she is treated as such, and people pray to her and travel to see her, and she can't walk on the ground, and she doesn't speak to people. And the interesting part of it is that even though it's a Hindu practice, it is always a Buddhist family that the girl comes from. And the practice can be flawed, or is flawed in many ways, but I think it's a really beautiful display of the way that those two religions like coincide with each other, because they're able to coexist with a lot of peace and just cooperation. So, do you guys think that Buddhism is a religion or a philosophy? Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say a philosophy because most religions believe in like a supreme being, and I feel like that Buddha was an actual person, and he was just promoting, ways to be a better person.
That's a lot of people believe that for that reason, because there's not any extreme like gods. Mm-hmm.
I believe the opposite. I think Buddhism is a religion. I think you have to have a supreme being to have a religion. And there's a clear set of beliefs and practices that guide our life, spiritually, morally. And Buddha, like Gandhi, like Christ, like Muhammad, like Abraham, were teachers, spiritual teachers.
I think it's probably both. I think it's kind of, that's why I think Buddhism is so fascinating, because I think it can flex to the interpretation. I think some people follow it as a religion, as a philosophy, and take it on more of a spiritual journey rather than like a set of rules. And I think that a lot of people align with it because there isn't like a direct answer to that question, and they're just, you're allowed, there's freedom in it. And it's just,
I think people engage with it as a religion when they feel that surge inside them to reach something higher, and whether that's a god or a deeper sense of being, and they need a track to run on. So the practices, the meditations, the mantras, the prayers, gives them a way to focus that energy. And for a thinking person, or an intellectual, or someone who's exploring it with their mind, sees the philosophical side of it and engages with it that way. So it's like two different ways of interacting with those teachings and absorbing them and processing them. And whether you call it a religion or philosophy, I think it's magnificent and it carries you to the next plane. Yeah, so it's kind of both. I like the answer that this person gave.
I think in the West it's a philosophy. In the East it's a religion. I think we've turned it into a philosophical system, and in its roots I think it's more religious.
I think it's a way of life, a way of living, a way of it shares a lot of common characteristics with a lot of religions, giving up worldly desires, giving up, selfish ambitions. And I think it's a way of life to focus on the here and now rather than what is tomorrow or what is yesterday. Just focus on the here and now.
What do you think?
Me? I think it's a combination, like Julia said. I think that because it's less of a rule book, it makes it more of a philosophy, but I also think those two things are very closely aligned with each other, because like someone said, it's more just an exploration of mind in the world, which I think both religion and a philosophy are. But I think it's a combination, but I think personally it's a little more of a philosophy.
Oh, I grew up with both, and I always got a sense that, in my mind, seeing a lot in my household, Buddhism, Christianity, and atheism, and agnosticism. There was like a lot going on, but I kind of felt like it resonated with me more as like a way of being, and sort of almost like a personal philosophy, the way that I saw it sort of manifested, and it was a lot about kind of looking inside. As opposed to, I kind of, although that's part of what I consider religion, I feel like religion is a lot of also kind of looking outside as well.
I think that Buddhism can kind of be split into two almost, where the idea of enlightenment is more philosophy, and that can be shared in other religions, but the idea of the rules, or not rules, but ways to reach enlightenment is kind of like rules that people use, that people follow and use it as a religion more, but the idea of enlightenment itself is more of a philosophy, and it's used in this religion.
I think it ends up being, for a lot of people, and for me, sort of a religion that's not a four-letter word, and more of a psychology or a guideline for a really healthy mindset, a healthy way to be in the world. And it shares so many precepts with other religions: do the right thing, don't hurt anybody, be generous, etc. But I really think the Buddhists had it right in terms of how to, be in the world with this complicated, brains of ours, and with each other. So I thought of it as a psychology.
Awesome. Anyone else have anything to add?
What do you define as nirvana? What do you define as nirvana? What is it? Because it's like they talk about this thing nirvana as a place when we go, when we die, that this is supposed to be this place that we're supposed to attain, or is it rather a state of mind in terms of being content with what you have and being happy who you are?
It's kind of the second one, where it's like a higher state of being, where you've reached a place where you don't have, you're not clinging to certain parts of our world, and you're kind of just, I don't completely understand it, honestly. But it's a higher state of being. Mhm.
And I wonder, Leo, why this question exists, really. Like, who cares? If it works, it works, and some people, except, I know some people, like I said before, would hate to consider themselves religious, or might look down on someone who says they were religious, or someone who doesn't have a religion, so maybe it serves those purposes, but other than that, it really, to me, doesn't seem to really matter much.
Yeah, that's kind of the reason is there's a lot of really strong associations with religion, and there's a lot of really positive associations, and there's also some pretty negative associations. And I think, personally, I do think of religion as a little bit more of a set of rules, which is a little bit like not my favorite thing. And the idea of philosophy is really appealing to me because it's all about exploration and personal interpretation. So I think you're right, it doesn't really matter. It's just a concept and it works if it works. But I think there are a lot of people who have such strong associations with the word religion or philosophy that it can be important to define. Mm-hmm.
One of the things I love about Buddhism, a lot of religions require blind faith to a set of rules, and Buddhism really is a set of guidelines, and the Buddha really encouraged people to not take them at face value, but to test them in their own life and experience them, and if they hold true, then you cling to them and they guide your life.
Okay, great. So, like you guys kind of all ended up talking about, there's no gods, there's no deities. The closest thing to a god is karma, which is the idea that like what you put out in the world, you will receive. But there's not like a being that is determining your value or your destiny. And there's no praying to gods because there really aren't any gods. There's a lot of honoring the Buddha, but there's not like just blindly praying, as you kind of said. And so there's a lot of different opinions about this, and one of the ways that it's debated is through something called pramana, which is a Buddhist debate where monks will have these big arguments about, apparently, I've never seen it myself, but apparently it can really seem like a big fight, but it's really just more of a conversation and a debate over different interpretations of Buddhism. And I think it kind of displays the whole point of Buddhism, which is that you can interpret it how you feel is correct for you, and you can explore different parts of it, and you can deeply dive into one part and not associate as strongly with another part because it's more of guidelines than rules. Yeah. All right. Any other questions?
How does Buddhism affect you?
Me?
Yeah, has it, after experiencing
Buddhism has been like a little involved in my life forever, but I think it was but I think it was really interesting to see it in Nepal because it was different, and I hadn't had it as like comprehensively just explained to me, and I think that I always thought of it as a religion, and then when we learned more about it in Nepal, which like we were going to temples, monasteries, and we got an amazing talk from a Buddhist monk, and we were really exposed to it, and it was really interesting to see the way that it's more of a lifestyle and it's really embedded in the culture, and it seemed like it is treated as a religion by many people, but it's more of a way of being.
That question, comment, love your presentation, I know you worked really hard on it. I especially, the slide where you talked about Siddhartha's, what he saw, and the pictures from Kathmandu of what you saw, really brilliant.